to order. Welcome to the extended resuming of meeting number 12 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Today, this meeting is being held in hybrid format with Mr. Housefather, I see, attending remotely. He's aware of all the rules regarding Zoom and how to lift your hand, how not to lift your hand, how to speak into microphones and such. So I won't go over those laboriously. Encore une fois, avant de continuer, je confirme que les tests de son.
Before continuing, I'd like to confirm that the tests have been carried out, and I'd call on all participants in person to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table for the benefit of our interpreters.
The debate on the suspended meeting, so the sub-amendment that was put forth by Mr. Lawton. I will go directly to you, Mr. Lawton, and then we can take it from there. So the floor is yours, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the third meeting that we have devoted to what should be very simple, a denunciation across party lines of child sexual exploitation, a call on the House of Commons to reinstate mandatory minimum sentences so that people are not given shamefully lenient sentences, as was the case in the two extremely egregious criminal offenses that went ultimately before the Supreme Court and led to the decision that triggered this. Now, the sub-amendment, assuming it is adopted and the amendment and the motion are adopted, is very simple. It is a call that the House invoke the notwithstanding clause, that the government rather invoke the notwithstanding clause, reinstate the mandatory minimums, and that this committee's call to such is reported to the House. This is an important procedural tool that allows the House of Commons to give this issue due attention and due consideration. So I believe we should vote on this immediately, and I call on all committee members to pass the sub-amendment and then the motion. Thank you, Chair.
For the sake of clarity, Andrew, and rest of members, I will just have the clerk read out formally the amendment, the sub-amendment, so that we all, for clarity, know what we're voting on. And then, absent any other hands, I'll ask the committee to proceed to a vote. So to get a few.
Mr. Clerk.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Ms. Lattanzio's amendment reads as follows.
Place all the words on the last paragraph after to with the following. Table legislation to address child sexual exploitation, reaffirming Parliament's unwavering commitment to protecting children and ensuring that offenders face the toughest sentences in our justice system allows. That our justice system allows. Then the sub-amendment from Mr. Lawton that was moved is as follows, that the amendment be amended by adding after the word allows, so at the end of the amendment, the following, provided that the government table its legislative response to the Supreme Court of Canada ruling before the end of 2025, and that this motion be reported to the House.
Okay, I assume you've heard that quite clearly. We'll proceed to the vote. Monsieur Fortin.
Would it be possible, Mr. Chair, for the clerk to reread the entire motion with the amendments, please? Well, yes, of course, in French and in English. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk. You mean the initial motion, the whole lot? Because there's the amendment, then there's the motion, the amendment, and then the sub-amendment, please.
Merci encore.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. So that the motion, French version, that this is Mr. Brock's motion, that given that the Supreme Court of Canada removed mandatory minimum sentences for offences related to child sexual exploitation and incorrectly ruled that these mandatory minimum sentences were cruel and unusual, and Given that the Premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan and Ontario, as well as the Leader of the official opposition in Manitoba, have all publicly called for the use of the notwithstanding clause to overturn this decision, the committee calls on the government to invoke the notwithstanding clause to reinstate these mandatory minimum sentences for child sexual exploitation and that this be reported to the House. Ms. Latanzio's amendment reads as follows: to replace all the words on the last paragraph after to with the following, quote, table legislation to address child sexual exploitation, reaffirming Parliament's unwavering commitment to protecting children and ensuring that offenders faced the toughest sentences our justice system allows. And then there's Mr. Lawton's sub-amendment, which moves that the amendment be amended by adding after the word, quote, allows, unquote, the following, quote, provided the government table its legislative response to this Supreme Court decision before the end of 2025 and that this motion be reported to the House.
Nous procéderons donc à...
So we'll now proceed with the vote. Raise your hands, please, on the sub-amendment. Those in favour of the sub-amendment, please say yay.
que tous ceux...
Those against the sub-amendment, please say nay. Raise your hands. So the yes has it. So therefore, back to the amendment itself, or the motion as amended, rather. Please vote by raising your hands, but Ms. Latanzio first. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment to make, which was sent last week, but I can send again to the clerk, and I can read it, and I have the English version.
Quand on arrête.
Juste, Mme Latanzio, une seconde.
Oui.
One moment, Ms. Latanzio, please.
C'est un nouveau sous-amendement. Oui. Je veux juste m'assurer que c'est un nouveau sous-amendement. C'est pas un
C'est un
nouveau...
autre amendement.
So this is a sub-amendment because we were dealing with the amendment now. Thank you.
Son propre langage. Latanzio. You need someone else. You just need someone. Yeah, you just need to... No, let's just make Mr. Housefathers back on. I just ask members to perhaps forget the last 6 minutes. Ms. Latanzia's withdrawing the sub-amendment as it stands. So where we stand now technically is discussion and vote on the amendment to the motion. I'm glad to have the clerk read it entirely back to everyone as amended, just for clarity, or we could proceed to debate and a vote.
No new sub-amendment?
There's no new sub-amendment. Yeah, let's just.
You're withdrawing?
Let's pretend
Okay.
that never happened, yeah.
But I'm sorry if I led to confusion, so I'm just, if the clerk wants to read that amendment, we're ready to vote on the amendment. Sorry.
C'est ça.
On garde l'amendement, mais pas de sous-amendement, c'est ça?
So there's not a second sub-amendment, I see, says Mr. Fortin. So we're voting on the amended motion, and I'd call on the clerk to reread everything. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with the amended amendment, I'll read it slowly. Where are we at? I'll tell you right away. At the end of the motion, when it says that the committee calls on the government, the amendment as amended reads as follows: to table legislation to combat child sexual exploitation and reaffirm Canada's or the Parliament's unwavering commitment to protect children and ensure that offenders face the toughest sentences that our justice system allows. Subject that the government tables its legislative response to this decision of the Supreme Court of Canada before end of 2025, and that be reported to the House. So that's the motion, the amendment as amended.
For debate and discussion, I see none. So I'll ask all those in favor to say yay, lift your hands. All those against, say nay. The yeas have it.
Chair,
Yeah, Ms. Latanzio.
I'd like to introduce an amendment.
Okay, we have Ms. Latanzio. Was that you, Larry? Was that you?
I had my hand up, but you recognize Patricia.
Yeah, I saw
first,
Patricia. I didn't know if it was you or Roman.
Sorry?
I didn't know if it was you or Roman.
It was me.
Okay.
It was me.
So, Patrice.
An amendment to what? Oh,
We have an amended motion. I'm making another amendment. Okay. So starting with right after reported to the House, we add the following paragraph: and that the meeting of this Thursday, November 20th, be the final meeting with witnesses on Bill C9. Clause by clause on Bill C9 will commence on Thursday, November 27th, and continue for as many meetings as required without interruption by any other subject. The deadline to submit amendments to Bill C9 will be on Monday, November 24th at 4 p.m.
Merci, Madame Latanzio. Je demande.
Thank you, Ms. Latanzio. The clerk, please. Did everyone receive a copy of that amendment?
We get this, yeah. So that's your question, Larry.
well, I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
We're going to get it.
You should be getting, I mean, I see the clerk drafting on the fly, so you should have it in your inboxes within the next few seconds.
I suggest we suspend so we can review this properly, Mr. Chair.
Have you received it?
Not yet.
Okay.
Once received, though, if we could suspend.
It should be coming to your inboxes. But in the interim, I'll suspend so that everyone can have a chance to review it and consider it. Ask if Mr. Rouse, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Housefather. Where are we? We are on, we suspended on the amendment that Ms. Latanzio put forward. We're now at the stage of debate or discussion on the topic. Je vois Monsieur Brock, puis ensuite vous, Monsieur Fortin.
Mr. Brock, then you, Mr. Fortin.
Thank you, Chair. I would state at the outset, I've reviewed the content of the amendment, sub-amendment proposed by the Liberal team, and it is completely outside the scope of what the original motion was about, not even closely resembles the intent and any aspect of the original motion. And quite frankly, what it does in terms of abbreviating the time set aside that was originally set aside for the study of C9 is a complete slap in the face and disrespectful to witnesses who had actually attended and ultimately could not testify, witnesses that were scheduled to attend today and had to be canceled. C9 is an important study, and we all agree to that study. We agreed to prioritize that study. We all agreed to the number of meetings. So for the life of me, I cannot accept that the position of the Liberal team that we should be shortchanging those witnesses who deserve and have an absolute right to testify if they've been invited to attend. So my first line of attack, Chair, is that this particular motion is complete, or this amendment is completely outside the scope, and I'd be asking for a ruling accordingly from the Chair.
I will rule on it if, but first I think Mr. Fortin and Ms. Latanzio wanted to speak on this, but I will rule on it. Réal, à toi.
No need. Thank you. You wanted to raise the same point as your colleague. Ms. Latanzio.
Remind the member opposite and the Conservative team that when this motion was brought forward,
Point of
we
order.
were actually on the study.
It is not a debatable motion, Chair.
I can allow some comments on it since Mr. Brock, right, but he didn't move immediately. He gave commentary, Mr. Brock gave commentary on introducing the motion. I think Ms. Latanzio has a right to reply, but I will proceed to the ruling right after that.
Chair, so as I was saying, when this motion was brought forth, you will recall that we were on a study on C9, and the motion, if it happens now to have nothing to do with C9, was brought forward while we were studying C9. And so I think it is more than relevant that this amendment be brought forward. But I'd also like to remind the members that today was also supposed to be a day on the study of C9 as per our schedule, and a schedule that had been agreed with all members in good faith. And here we are discussing another motion that had nothing to do supposedly with C9. So, Mr. Chair, I would indulge and ask you to rule in favor of the relevancy of incorporating my amendment into this amendment.
So the motion is indeed not in order and out of scope. So technically, we go back to the motion as amended to vote on or to have discussion and debate on. So are there any hands wanting to discuss the motion as amended?
Could you please read the motion that is before?
We'll get the clerk to read.
Thank you.
For clarity, because this is getting increasingly.
And then I would ask for a brief suspension after the motion has been read in its current form, please.
Okay. Allez-y, Monsieur le Greffier.
Merci, Monsieur le
Go ahead, Mr. Clerk. So, Mr. Chair, the outcome is that the motion as amended is the following, and I'll read it aloud.
Given the Supreme Court of Canada removed mandatory minimum sentences for offenses related to child sexual exploitation and incorrectly ruled that these mandatory minimum sentences were cruel and unusual, and given that the premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, as well as the leader of the official opposition in Manitoba, have publicly called for the use of the notwithstanding clause to overturn this decision, the committee called on the government to table legislation to address child sexual exploitation, reaffirming Parliament's unwavering commitment to protect children and ensuring that offenders face the toughest sentences that our justice system allows, provided that the government table its legislative response to this Supreme Court of Canada ruling before the end of 2025, and that this motion be reported to the House.
Monsieur le Président, j'avais compris que
Mr. Clerk, I thought that this vote was on the amended motion that Ms. Latenzio brought forward. Now, I understand that there was her sub-amendment to the amendment was out of scope and therefore ruled out of order, but the amendment that I noted was to table legislation to combat child sexual exploitation rather than having to do with the notwithstanding clause. Did I misunderstand something? Because we're voting on the amendment to the main motion, right? Indeed, Mr. Fortin. Well, we'll read it in French. Well, it doesn't matter whether it's in French or in English. I just want to make sure that we're actually dealing with the proposed amendment presented by Ms. Latenzio. Well, it was the amended motion, the final iteration. But what was just read out loud, says Mr. Fortin. Listen, I'm sorry. The motion that we originally received was the one having to do with invoking the notwithstanding clause. But Ms. Latenzio's amendment, unless I'm misundertaken and subject to her correcting me, is that the committee is calling on the government to table legislation to combat child sexual exploitation and so on and so forth. That's what we're voting on, right? That's not what was just read out loud. Indeed, says the chair. Go ahead, read it aloud with the proposed amendment, please. Go ahead, please, Mr. Clerk.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Here is the motion as amended. That given that the Supreme Court of Canada removed mandatory minimum sentences for offences related to child sexual exploitation and incorrectly ruled that these mandatory minimum sentences were cruel and unusual, and given that the premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan and Ontario, as well as the leader of the official opposition in Manitoba, have all publicly called for the use of the notwithstanding clause to overturn this decision, the committee is calling on the government to table legislation to combat child sexual exploitation and reaffirm Parliament's unwavering commitment to protect children and to guarantee that offenders face the tougher sentences of our justice system. Subject to the government table its legislating response to the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada before the end of 2025, and that this motion be reported on by the House. Inaudible. Well, that suits me, says Mr. Fortin. Mr. Chair, on this motion, well, I have an amendment to move. I don't know if I should do that now or when the motion's actually carried. Well, no, you have to do it now, says the Chair, not later. So here's my proposal, that we strike the word wrongly or incorrectly, so in the first paragraph, and simply that the Supreme Court ruled that these mandatory minimum sentences are cruel and unusual. I don't think that it's up to the committee to tell Supreme Court justices that they in fact, ruled incorrectly. That makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So I would remove the word erroné in French, incorrectly in English. Delete it.
Ça change rien à la motion.
It really doesn't substantively change the motion. It just takes out that word.
Yeah, okay. You agree, Patricia? I agree. So,
Judge judges.
that,
Yeah.
Okay, so let's, we can do this formally or informally. It looks like the committee unanimously agrees to remove that language.
Erroneously.
The
Erronément.
word incorrectly in English.
Yeah,
Et
okay.
de façon erronée.
Incorrectly in English.
Again, we'll do a full reread for purposes of the vote, and I'll ask the clerk to do so. It'll sound exactly like what it sounded the last couple of rounds, except it'll remove the words incorrectly or erroné in French. So,
Sure.
allez-y, Monsieur le greffier.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Amended read as follows, that given the Supreme Court of Canada removed mandatory minimum sentences for offenses related to child sexual exploitation and ruled that these mandatory minimum sentences were cruel and unusual, and given that the premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, as well as the leader of the official opposition in Manitoba, have all publicly called for the use of the notwithstanding clause to overturn this decision, the committee called on the government to table legislation to address sexual exploitation, reaffirming Parliament's unwavering commitment to protecting children and ensuring that offenders face the toughest sentences that our justice system allows, provided that the government table its legislative response to this Supreme Court of Canada ruling before the end of 2025, and that this motion be reported to the House.
Now, Mr. Lawton asked for a brief suspension to discuss. Of the vote, just to be entirely clear, and assuming I don't see any heads nodding in the wrong direction, so I'll assume that is a yes. We can have debate or proceed directly to a vote, so I'll ask for any hands to debate on this motion. Okay, all those in favor of the motion as amended, please raise your hands. As amended. No, hang on. All those against? Okay, the motion, the ayes have it, the motion is carried. The entire motion as amended. Yeah.
the original motion and the amended motion is now carried. Not just the amendment.
No.
There's a misunderstanding here from, not an,
Amendment.
on the motion as amended.
Mr.
But then we have to go back to the main motion.
No.
Once everything's complete.
Mr. Chair,
No, my amendment, I put it, sorry, can we suspend, Mr. Chair?
Is this on this issue? Okay, well, I just want to get back to this issue and confirm to the team or the group here that the vote is carried. I do want to tell the team that, or members of this committee, that the date for amendments on C9 is Monday, the 24th. And on that note, we're now adjourned. Yeah, done.